Welcome to the Tippie Leads podcast. Stories from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business that will change the way you work and lead. I'm your host, Nick Westergaard. I teach at Tippie and lead our Story Lab program. Each season of Tippie Leads, we focus on a grand challenge in today's changing world of work. This season, we're looking at how you can be the CEO of your life. Previously, we talked about vision, knowing where you want to go. But vision without action is just a dream. So how do you make progress day after day, even when the motivation fades? That's where Tippie's Rob Rouwenhorst can help. Rob is an associate professor of instruction in the marketing department, where he specializes in behavioral science. He's advised organizations like General Motors, Han, and Transamerica. But what he's most passionate about is helping people become better versions of themselves through the power of habits. That's where we're going first, a deep dive with Rob on how you can build better habits. After that, we'll hear from Tippie student Charlie Maxwell, who shares a story about setting goals and building habits by daring yourself. And of course, we'll bring it all together with a final Tip E just for you. Ready? Let's get started. Rob Rouwenhorst, welcome to Tippie Leads.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
You know, we were talking about all of the formal interview stuff, but I actually got out, I keep an old school calculator at my desk, and I think that's a little bit of old manning, even though there's countless calculator apps. But I actually was curious on the math. How long have we known each other? And it's since 1990. It's 36 years. Since the sixth grade. I'm not sure which sounds like the biggest flex.
Longest number.
But it's a long time.
Yeah. You and I met in the Boy Scouts, which was funny because you and I grew up a block away from one another and went to different schools because the dividing line was just set such. And then we met in the sixth grade, Boy Scouts, helped one another get Eagle Scout. We could see the development of one another in terms of presentations, helping others. And it's been a fabulous ride. And then we lost track of one another, but happy to be part of one another's lives and good friends.
You always give me that introduction when I come talk to your big intro to marketing strategy class, which is part of the core at Tippie. And one thing that interests me is, in addition to kind of the foundational marketing strategy, you talk with students about habit building at Tippie.
Mm-hmm.
You've kind of become the habit guy.
Yep.
But I was curious on the story of how you got into the science of habit building.
Yeah, it was 10 years ago now. My fourth child was born 11 years ago. She was born 11 years ago. But when she was about one, I took a really painful look in the mirror, and I had the dad bod. I was way overweight, and I had held on to my hair way too long, and it was just really thinning, and it looked terrible. And so I have this really bad picture that I put up for students. And I was like, okay, I can change one of these things immediately. So I shaved my head. And then I was thinking, okay, what can I do to change my weight? And so I decided I would go swimming. And I hadn't swam since swim lessons when I was a kid. And so, but I thought, it's easy on the joints, and I don't feel sweating like, running. So I went swimming, and I sucked, and I was slow, and all I could do was breaststroke. But I kept going day after day. And that completely changed my life. Of all of a sudden, I got better. I could do crawl. Then I was no longer taking breaks after every lap. Then I could do flip turns. Then I started swimming way faster and could do it in a mile in 30 minutes. And then I started to question my reward at that point, honestly. I would go home and I would brew up this big pot of pasta and put a whole bunch of butter and Parmesan cheese on it. That was my standard lunch. And so then I started thinking, why am I eating this? Why am I carb loading in this terrible thing? So then I started to think about eating healthy. And then I started thinking about, wait, why my sleep schedule sucks. What can I do to tweak sleep? And I started just this complete habit stack change of life. And then I read a book, and the book was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And that was the science, shall we say, behind all the stuff that I had discovered those couple years.
So, talk about how you incorporate it into class, because
Yeah.
you've had some pretty amazing success stories and students sharing things with you that seem outside the domain of hey, I learned some great stuff about marketing. Not to
Yeah.
diminish that, because
No.
it is of course important.
Yeah. That's why we're here teaching the 4 Ps of marketing and segmenting, targeting, positioning, these core concepts. But what happened was I was teaching a class, and as part of the assignment, I wanted them to read business books and then have just a presentation, individual presentation, talking about the business book that they read. And somebody said, "Hey, can I read Atomic Habits?" And I said, "Well, that's not really a business book, but I like the concepts behind it so much. Sure." So she gave the presentation, and then at the end, I was giving a quiz, weekly quiz that I always gave. And I said, "Hey, everybody, no points, but based on that Atomic Habits book, what's a habit that you want to do daily for the next week?" People wrote down things like, "I want to learn to play the guitar, drink more water, get off social media," all these different things. Next week comes another quiz, and I said, "Hey, no points. Did you accomplish your habit? Yes or no?" 2/3 of the class accomplished their habit. And I connected with that class and individuals in there in a way that I had never before, because people were talking about their habits before and after class, and I was talking with them about it and just the changes that were occurring. And so then I felt like I was onto something. So then I started to roll it out to more classes. And it's just been amazing, the transformative effects that it's had on people. I've had multiple people quit smoking. I've had multiple people lose significant amount of weight, like 20 pounds over the course of 16 weeks with me. I have people come up to me weekly basis, if not almost every other day, saying stuff like, couple days, 2 days ago, a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm reading for like the first time in my life." Because the first day of class, I put up a slide and I say, "Imagine if you read 20 pages a day, that equals 30 books a year. How much smarter would you be if you read 30 books?" And so he's like, "Oh, I should do that," as opposed to being scrolling on his phone all the time. And so he'd been doing it, and he was just saying his mind feels better. And he was laughing at the changes, because like his friends, his roommates will say, "Hey, come game with us." And he's like, "No, I got to finish this chapter." And so it's these little tiny tweaks that I've seen in now thousands of students. And so it's incredibly rewarding. I'm still covering the marketing concepts, but this is an assignment that has taken on a life of its own, and I couldn't be more pleased by it.
That's amazing. So, this season on Tippie Leads, we're talking about how you can be the CEO of your life, bringing these skills to bear to practice self leadership. And we've talked about setting a vision. And really, that would kind of correlate to the goal, or a new habit, or probably there's a bigger goal, and then habits that we need to create to move toward that. So how do we, if we've set a new vision for ourselves, how do we use habits to get us where we want to go?
Yeah, I've always been intrigued with this notion of infinite habits versus finite habits. And what I mean by that is, an infinite habit is something that you can never fully accomplish. I want to be a better artist. I want to be an athlete. I want to be a CEO. Well, what does that mean? And so then there are these finite habits that you need to think about, that where it's like a yes or a no. And so I want to get a better sleep. Great. Wonderful. I think sleep is a core habit that we all need. Everybody, I think, wants to be a better sleeper. So then what are the yes, no kind of questions that you can answer? So is it, I'm going to bed at the same time? I'm waking up at the same time? Am I cooling down my bedroom? Am I not consuming television, electronic device, social media right before bed? Do I have some sort of relaxation technique? And so you think through what are the kind of micro, small little habits that are all the yes, no kind of thing before you get to this kind of bigger, infinite sort of goal, vision, whatever you want to call it, where you can never fully accomplish it, but it's something that, every one of us is striving for or should be.
So it's almost, you point out something about making sure kind of that there's almost a definition between maybe a larger goal and then habits that are built to support that.
Yes. Yeah. So then the bigger, longer goal that I encourage students or any lifelong learner and all students is thinking through what's the lifestyle. And so that lifestyle is kind of your big overall goal of, okay, well, I want to be an athlete. I want to be a lifelong learner. I want to be a professor. I want to be a CEO, whatever it is. And then thinking through, okay, how should I be spending that time in order to accomplish that? And so whether it's, okay, I want to be an athlete, wonderful. Then, what are those little tiny steps that are going to get you there? Because those are always going to change. Like your attitudes are going to change, your goals are going to change. Once you accomplish some goal, then it becomes the next goal. And so then what do you do after that? And so all too often people will set a finite goal, say, so the goal is not to be healthy. The goal is to lose, I want to weigh X amount. Well, what happens when you get to X amount? Then you're just stuck and you're like, well, I accomplished my goal. And then so many people kind of balloon back up and they gain the weight because they accomplished their goal, but then they're left with this feeling of, they don't know what to do, versus somebody that has that lifelong, shall we say, vision where I want to be healthy. I want to be a healthy person. Then you put in those micro goals of thinking through, what does a healthy person do? Well, healthy person their calorie count doesn't exceed, the count that they're burning off. And so you think through, or it equals. So you think through those kind of micro habits that are going to lead to a healthy life.
So I think sometimes it can be overwhelming as we look at kind of that big vision of, I want to be, you mentioned an athlete or a CEO, or even advance to a role of leadership, or maybe it's, I want to spin off my own thing and start my own side business that I can leave what I'm doing and build up. And then under that, we would build various habits to help us get towards that. But I think sometimes it feels like, okay, I need to get all of these started at once. Is it best to take them one at a time instead of nudging each one along individually?
Yeah, so you got to think about individual differences. I always couch this advice with everybody's different.
Right.
So I will say some people, fewer, are great at doing it all. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to be the CEO. I'm going to be, I'm no longer going to smoke. And then they can just do everything. Few do that. Now, in terms of probability and the advice for more people in general terms, start small, start on one and build that, as opposed to start on the many.
So as we think about that, the other thing about the science of habit that always gets me is the role friction plays in building these as well, making sure that something is easy to do, and those little pieces of removing friction add up to habit impact as well, right?
Yeah. So one of my favorite psychologists was a guy named Kurt Lewin. And Kurt Lewin was a German psychologist in the 1900s. And in the 1930s, he comes out with what's known as Lewin's equation. And Lewin's equation is so simple. It's like and I love the best ideas. The best ideas to me are the ones where you read it or you see it and you're like, how did you think of this? And so Lewin's equation is behavior as a function of people and their environment. So as the CEO of our own lives, we can influence, we can control that environment. And so to your point and question about, is it easier to incentivize and motivate, or is it better to reduce friction and make it easier to do? Kurt Lewin's insight was it's more powerful if you remove friction. And so in terms of removing friction, one of the key things is just the environment. If you're trying to eat healthy, get rid of the Doritos and get rid of the soda and get rid of all the other stuff. And if all there are fruits and vegetables and healthy drinks, that's what you're going to do. If you want to drink more water, I mean, I always have a water bottle with me, and it just makes it, yeah. And then you're going to consume more water. And so just making things available and easy to do, that's way more sustainable than, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to resist the temptation and have my entire kitchen filled with temptation. No. So make those habits, construct the environment to make your habits easier. Or on the flip side, if you're trying to remove something bad, then, make it more difficult to accomplish that thing.
So if we talk about reducing friction, and it really probably also helps us on the time side of things, can building better systems give a leader more freedom to focus on things that matter?
Yes, in one word, if you can reduce the amount of choices that you have, then because you got to think that making choices is kind of like a muscle. And so if you're constantly making choices, then your muscle loses its ability to flex, and it's not as strong, and you just feel weak. And so there's a retired Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, who wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom. And in it, the premise is very simple, which is if you lead a disciplined life and you don't give yourself so many choices through either the environment in which you construct or just this habit that you do, such as he gets up at 4:30 a.m. and works out every day. And other people like Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein, I think President Obama also did this, where you don't even consider your wardrobe. You just wear the same thing every day.
Avoiding decision fatigue.
Exactly. And so when you avoid decision fatigue, then your decision making is strong, and you can put in the time and effort to change the world in the case of you're the president, or science in the case of you're Albert Einstein, or fill in the blank with all of these different things. So yes, thinking through how can I simplify my life? How can I just make it easier to make these choices that are habits? And then you've got kind of the ability and energy to make the harder decisions that, are not habitual.
So we've talked about the impact of habits on leaders being able to focus on more. Do habits ladder up to organizations as well?
Organizations are just groups of people.
That's what I'm. Yeah,
so,
I was mostly curious because I don't know even if that's the right question, but it seems like something.
Let me go off on this because it's. Do you have a culture of this? So one of the things that really kind of. So again, this habit assignment. When I rolled it out to the MBA students, I thought the MBA students are going to be, this is just too foo-foo. What are you doing, dude? But if anything, they're the most motivated.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because not only do they see the power of it, but also they've reached a point in their career where maybe they're just kind of in a rut, both doing positive things, but also negative things. And so suddenly the habit assignment is kind of a tweak in their awareness and thinking to the point of, am I being intentional in what I'm doing? And so suddenly they get more intentional about what they're doing, and it translates into, hey, maybe this is something I can roll out to my team. And so I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have told me, this is something I'm doing with my team. We bought the Atomic Habits book. We're doing this. We're doing these different things. And so they thank me for just the awareness and knowledge of it. And so, yeah, I think you can have kind of a culture of, habits of being better, of improvement in so many things outside of just better business decisions. And so I think that yes, habits can stack to, groups of people. And then there's kind of a social proof concept of, everybody's doing it. And so it can increase your ability to actually accomplish this habit if your friends are doing it. And then, you're all, I don't know, health app and you're comparing your runs or doing whatever it is and just talking about these things and the positive impact.
So, how can we make sure that the new habits stick and to keep from either plateauing or, like you talked about on the weight side of things, but it can manifest itself different ways, ballooning back up after hitting a goal?
I think it comes down to three different things. You need to make it specific, you need to make it easy, and you need to make it rewarding. And so, one of the key things in terms of habits, and again, it kind of comes down to your question about in the very beginning, is it a vision or kind of an infinite habit or is it a finite thing? Visions are great. I want to sleep better. Wonderful. But then what does that mean? Because then at the end of the day, people will get kind of nebulous about whether that was good or bad, or I want to be an athlete. Well, what does that mean? And so you need to make it very specific. And so by making it specific, you're kind of saying, I'm going to engage in X behavior. Okay. I'm gonna go run or jog or walk a mile at a specific time or in a specific location. So making it very, very specific such that, you can hold yourself accountable. Yes, I did this, or no, I didn't. Second thing is just making it easier, which we kind of talked about, where a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm going to go run a mile." Well, if you haven't run in years, that's going to be really, really tough. And so maybe you'll do it for one day, but that second day, even tougher. By the third, you're done and you're like, nope, not for me. So when you establish a habit, it's fine to come up with an easy, and it's fine to be bold, and that's fine. But if it's too bold, then make it easier, or just start simple and then grow. And again, most people, if you start simple and grow, you will stick with it longer than those that go big and bold and then kind of have to reevaluate. And then the third thing is just make it rewarding, and rewarding can change with time. So again, it wasn't such a bad policy when I was swimming and losing weight from the exercise, but then gaining it back by rewarding myself with the giant pot of pasta. But the reward will change. And so now, well, I think any athlete can attest to this. When you work out, you got the runner's high, the swimmer's high. You look in the mirror and you just feel good about yourself. So the rewards will change with time. But to make a habit lasting, make it specific, make it easy, and make it rewarding.
I'm Kira Ellerbrook. I am a student here at Tippie, a producer on the podcast, as well as a Story Lab peer mentor. And today, because we're talking about setting goals and daring yourself by trying something new, we've chosen Charlie Maxwell's story, where he recounts a time where he decided to run a marathon, despite at the beginning once having no proper training.
Growing up, me and my sister did not like talking to new people. Things like opening the door for a stranger or ordering at a menu from a restaurant, things like that were really scary to us. So much so that we dare each other to, go up and talk to strangers. I remember one time she dared me to say hi to 10 people at the grocery store. And, I was a little kid and I would just go up and say hi, and they would be polite and say hi back, things like that. It wasn't that big of a deal. But to me, going up there was so much anxiety involved in going up and talking to these people and saying hi. It was a monumental challenge for me. But one thing I started to notice the more I did it was it got a little bit easier. And so I didn't feel all this anxiety when I would go up and talk to these people. I would be comfortable chatting with them and actually having a conversation. And that helped me a lot growing up. Now, I didn't think about these dares as being some monumental moment in my past. I didn't really think about them at all for many years, up until my freshman year of college, when I decided I wanted to run a marathon. I'd ran in track and cross country in high school, but this was 26.3 miles instead of most I had done, which is around 3 miles. And so it was a huge difference. So it was in October and I trained all summer for it. And the day it came, it was great weather. I just had on my short shorts, and my long sleeve shirt, and I was ready to go. And first 10 miles went by a breeze. I was hitting the pace I wanted. I was with the group I wanted to hit. And then after that, it started to get a little harder each mile until around mile 19, when I just really wanted to stop more than anything else. And it wasn't just I dreaded the pain. I was actually sort of afraid of taking this next step. I was hurting in places I'd never hurt before, and I just did not want to continue at all. But I sort of had to, dare myself to take this next half mile. And I sort of set that dare in place, much like when I was younger, getting dared to do these other things that scared me. And so I did this next half mile, and it was still just as bad. But I thought, if I kept on doing it, it might just get a little bit easier. And I was able to eventually, mile after mile, continue to jog. And then I finished the race, not with the time that I wanted to, but I was able to finish it jogging, which was something I was immensely proud of. And so I sort of got from these two situations that, trying out these things that scare me, after I do them a little bit more, it gets a little bit easier each time. And I can really grow a lot from these goals that I had made. So I had to put this to practice in a new way later on that year when I faced something that I'm sure all of you were affected by, which was COVID-19. Everyone was stuck inside, away from friends and family, not being able to go to their work or education. And that really affected me in ways like anxiety and over seemingly nothingness and feeling lethargic, not wanting to get up or dress. And these are things I had never experienced before. I didn't know how to recognize these feelings, and I knew that to sort of understand these emotions and change my behavior, it was going to be really hard. To think introspectively about myself and how these emotions were affecting my behaviors was going to take a lot of work. But I had this idea from these other two that if I, sort of started to think about my emotions and maybe even talk about them, the more I did it, the easier it would get. And so while this was really difficult, this strategy did help me get out of that rut in my life, and I was able to continue on my education. These challenges were all things that I faced that were really something that was difficult to me, but I was able to get through. And so then when I was closing up my college career and I had to make a big decision about whether to continue on to find a job or continue my education, I found this great program, the finance program that I'm in now, and I really wanted to try it out, but I was scared. I had only taken one finance class, and my background was not in this finance area at all. It was fun, but hard. And I knew that going in, I would start to feel like an imposter, like I would be behind all my other classmates, things like that. And I was scared to feel these emotions. So I really had to take that step and dare myself to apply to this program with the idea that, yes, while I might feel like that at first, eventually I would get the hang of it and I'm capable of achieving this goal. Now, these challenges were big moments in my life that all turned out okay, but a lot of times when this strategy happens, it didn't work out like that. But it is super effective, I think, even in smaller situations. Things like walking up here and talking to you all today is something that was scary, coming up. But because of this idea that, really daring myself to work on this strategy and come up, it made it a little bit easier. And so I want to close with a dare for you all. I dare you all to think about something that scares you. Maybe not something that's necessarily dangerous, but something that's well outside your comfort zone, but something you may grow from. And I dare you to take that leap and to try out what this opportunity could bring to you. Thank you.
Let's go back to our guest one last time for a final tip E for you to remember in your work.
It's okay when you plateau. One of my favorite, and yours too, authors is Kurt Vonnegut. So when Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22, passed away, Vonnegut wrote a poem as an obituary, I believe, in the New Yorker. And it's very short. It's maybe a paragraph or two. And in it, he tells a story of the two of them are at a billionaire's party, and they're looking around his house, and they see all this artwork. And Vonnegut goes to Heller, man, isn't this amazing? This guy, he made more money yesterday than you've made on all of your royalties from Catch-22. And Heller turns to Vonnegut and says, yeah, but I have one thing he doesn't have. And Vonnegut says, what's that? And Joseph Heller says, knowing when I have enough. Mm. And so one of the things that you discover when you're trying to be the best athlete, be the best scholar, be the best CEO, is if you're constantly going for the next thing and constantly on kind of that hedonic treadmill, there's no end in sight and you'll never be happy. And so I love the Vonnegut story because you have to think about when you achieve something, it's okay to say it's enough. It's okay if you're happy in the moment and your employees are happy and your company is doing well to say, we don't need to continuously grow. We don't need to continuously become a bodybuilder and just keep growing and be Mr. Olympia, Mr. Universe, Mr. whatever. It's okay in all facets, whether it's, being a parent, being a spouse, being a CEO, we have all these different roles and identities of you can't put in 24 hours in a day into any one of them. And so it's a question of balance. And so it's okay to say, okay, I have enough, and then focus in on the other things.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Tippie Leads. Big thanks to Rob Rouwenhorst for breaking down the science of habits in a way that's actually actionable. And to Charlie Maxwell for sharing a story that's equal parts honest and motivating. As always, thanks to Kira Ellerbrook for producing our Student Story segment and the Tippie Marketing Communications team for supporting the show. Next, we're talking about balance. Professor Beth Livingston joins us to explore how to manage your time, energy, and priorities without burning out. You're not going to want to miss this one. See you there. This has been Tippie Leads, a podcast from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. To learn more about our faculty guests, their research, and more, go to tippie.uiowa.edu/Tippie Leads. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or coworker. Or better yet, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. On behalf of everyone at Tippie, thanks for listening, and go Hawks!